Revenge films.
I lived with my parents, my big brother, and my little brother. My mother was bright and loved by everyone, so I was proud to have her as my mother, but she suddenly broke because of what my big brother said. Actually, my mother had a tragic past that we didn't know about. It turns out that my father married her, accepting everything she's been through, and he had told us that she had no relatives. But it was just that she had cut relations with her family. My brother, who caused my mom to go crazy, was always a good kid. He was the most hard-working out of us, and he was very kind to me and my little brother as well, so I looked up to him. My mother worked as a Japanese language teacher part-time, but she was also a housewife at the same time, and she never slacked off with housework despite having a part-time job. She would always come to our school events, our house was always clean, and most importantly, she was a great cook. She had a great relationship with my father as well, so in terms of finances and household problems, we siblings never struggled. My brother went to study abroad and went to grad school, and he started living alone after getting a job, but that was when he started to go crazy. When he came home sometimes, he started insulting my mother for some reason, although he had never done such a thing in the past, and it was hard to believe he was acting that way considering how he used to behave.
Mom, you're a housewife, right? You obviously have to be perfect with housework.
He said something like that, but she was not exactly a housewife. She didn't make a lot of money, but she had a part-time job. But from the perspective of my brother, it apparently looked like she was slacking off at home. But from the perspective of me and my little brother, we never thought she was slacking off, and we actually wanted her to rest more because she was so busy that she barely had enough time to sit down. So I sided with my mother, although I got into fights with him. And soon I started to think that I preferred him not to come home. One day, when we gathered as a family on our parents' wedding anniversary, I honestly didn't want my brother to come, but we decided to gather as a family to celebrate, so I couldn't ignore him, and when I invited him, he came over. I really hoped that he wouldn't ruin this occasion because it was an anniversary, but my hopes were in vain, and he suddenly started insulting my mother again as always.
Mom, aren't you embarrassed for living off Dad like a parasite? It looks like you grew up not knowing any hardships. I guess you didn't learn to feel the emotion of embarrassment.
Then her smile suddenly faded. With a cold stare I've never seen her show, she grabbed my brother by his collar. What do you know about me? Do you have any idea about how much I've suffered? How much I was tempted to die, devastated to continue living? There's no way you'd understand. Absolutely no way! Before we could stop her, she suddenly burst out laughing. Looking at her in a way we couldn't imagine from her usual respectful way of speaking, we were shocked. My brother was weeping, probably out of fear. If what I've gone through weren't hardships, what does hardship mean? So confusing, I have no idea. She said as if she had gone insane, and her eyes were definitely showing that she had lost her mind. At the end, the party was canceled, and we forcefully separated my brother from my mother and made him go home. The next day, my father and I decided to take her to the therapist. And while we waited, I heard from him about my mother's past for the first time. When my mother was born, her mother had already passed away, and her father didn't take care of her at all, drowning himself in alcohol and gambling. Her grandparents meddled with her life so much, and they treated her asthma as a normal cold, and there was a time she almost died. The four of them lived together in a tiny room, and she made money herself to go to high school. She spent most of her time in the library studying as much as she could. But her father used up all the inheritance from her mother she was planning to use on her university tuition, and she had no other choice but to go to university with a newspaper scholarship. After her graduation, because her father was in debt and never looked after his ill parents, she had to work night jobs alongside her full-time jobs, and she was forced to earn more than $10 million. During those years, she met my father, fell in love, and got married. My father was the one who accepted all her tragedies and hardships, but my brother ruined all that. I simply couldn't forgive my brother for what he did. Thinking back, the reason why he was dumped by his girlfriend he had been dating for a long time was because he said something similar to her like he did to my mother. How come I was ignorant about this all this time? I understood nothing about her. Although the trigger was my brother, I was full of regrets. After she got a checkup at the hospital, it was decided that my father would stay with her for a while to take care of her. She was far from recovering fully, but just when her mental state was stabilizing, my little brother, who was looking for my brother, told me that he found him at his senior's house. When I contacted my brother, saying that I knew where he was, and if he didn't come visit us, we'd go find him directly, he answered that he'll meet us only if his senior from work was with him. So we decided to have a talk in a private room at a restaurant with the four of us. I had no idea why we had to include his senior in family matters because he was basically a stranger, so I was irritated. But I wanted to talk to my brother no matter what, so I had to ignore that. The senior my brother was accompanied by is apparently good at his work and takes good care of his juniors. I guess they got along well, but it seemed like my brother worshipped him. It turns out that he was from a prestigious family with a long history, copying his father. He had been treating his sister, even his own mother, like a slave. He had grown up with that kind of ideology, and my brother, who was his junior, had also started to think like him. From my perspective, he only looked like a trashy person, so I was irritated, unable to understand why my brother worshipped him so much. I found out during our discussion that the reason why my brother was behaving that way towards my mother was because he just copied how his senior thought, and that made me even more irritated. After talking with them for some while, when my little brother left for the bathroom, the senior started flirting with me. Just when I realized that he was getting really close to me, he suddenly pinned me onto the ground. He was on top of me.
"You can be my girlfriend,"
he said to me. When my brother showed him a photo of me, apparently he grew fond of me, but he was disgusting, so I fought back, but he obviously got mad with me.
"You're a girl, but you dare to reject me? Just shut up and let me do it!"
He said as he tried to take my clothes off, so when I desperately fought back, he punched me hard enough to bruise my face. My brother was just watching all of this happening, and I was crying out in fear, but my little brother quickly came back and pulled the senior off me and rescued me. My little brother yelled at his older brother if he was insane, but he quickly took me out of the restaurant. After that, my father got really mad, and he forced my brother to go to train at his relative's temple under surveillance. He had decided not to give any inheritance to my brother, and I was shocked to know the amount. I don't know the details, but he apparently had $50 million saved up. It was true that we never struggled financially, but we weren't part of the high society nor owned any real estate. I was shocked to know that people could save this much despite being just a salaryman. But all of our money was under my mother's control, so I bet it was her hard work. I bet she had been saving up little by little after giving birth to us siblings. My mother also had a separate set of savings to support themselves once they grew old. Knowing that she really tried hard to save up so that we siblings could inherit them, I really could not forgive what my brother did to her. For a while, I stayed with my mother to take care of her, but after 3 months, she was finally back to being mentally stable. But in return, we no longer brought up my brother's name nor about her past. My father, my little brother, and I are trying our best to forget about my older brother. It turns out that the senior was guilty of several crimes in the past before he sexually assaulted me, so he was put into jail, guilty for damage and loss. As a result, his parents broke relations with him, and he also got fired from his company. Serves him right. Maybe my brother would realize his mistakes while training in the temple, but things would be too late by then, I think.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.